while her ex-husband was busy preparing to bring his new bride home. In a stark, white postpartum room, the woman he had once abandoned was giving birth to a child all alone. 6 months after their divorce, Mia thought she could quietly raise her child, burying all the pain and misunderstandings of the past. But a single wedding invitation phone call tore her secret wide open. The moment he rushed to the hospital and saw the baby's face a mirror image of his own, his entire world collapsed. Who was this child? Why did she hide the baby for half a year? And behind that cold divorce, was it truly a betrayal or a cruel, orchestrated conspiracy? And now, we invite you to listen to the story. Mia woke up to the faint clinical smell of antiseptic and the cold white walls of the postpartum recovery room. Outside the window, the Seattle rain was falling. It wasn't a heavy downpour, just a persistent rhythmic drizzle, like someone patiently tapping their fingers against the glass. That sound blended with the squeak of medication carts in the hallway, the soft thud of nurses' clogs, and the sharp cry of a newborn in the next room. It all formed a distant, blurry hum of activity, as if the rest of the world was carrying on normally, and she alone had been left behind in a paralyzing, agonizing silence. The C-section incision on her lower abdomen flared with a sharp ache. Mia only tilted her head slightly, yet her entire body felt as if it were being stretched to the breaking point. She bit her lip, swallowing a groan. It hurt so much. The pain wasn't as violent as it had been on the operating table, but it was a dull, relentless burn, like a hot thread stitching her to reality. Next to her, in the small hospital bassinet, baby Sky was sleeping. She was so tiny, her skin flushed, her 2 little hands balled into fists like unbloomed rosebuds, her eyelashes so thin they almost melted into her soft skin. Mia looked at her daughter, and the aching in her heart eased a little. Over the past 6 months, she had survived too many nights alone, hiding her growing belly under oversized trench coats, alone, sitting in the hospital, waiting room for her OB/GYN appointments, alone, hearing the doctor say the baby was breech and she needed to prepare for a C-section. And yesterday she had been alone when she signed the surgical consent form. The triage nurse had looked at the blank space under emergency contact, hesitated, and asked, "Is there no one here with you, honey?" Mia had only offered a faint smile. "I can sign for myself, right?" The young nurse's eyes had dropped. She probably wanted to ask more, but decided against it. Working in a Seattle hospital long enough, you see a lot of unspoken sadness. Mia weakly reached out to touch the edge of the bassinet. The fingertips of the Azo hand with the IV line were icy cold. "Sky, my sweet girl," she whispered, her voice raspy from exhaustion. "From now on, it's just you and me against the world." Right at that moment, the cell phone on the bedside table buzzed. The screen lit. Up the pale room. Harrison. That name was like a heavy stone dropped into a lake. She had desperately tried to keep still. Mia stared at his name for a long time. So long the ringing almost stopped. 6 months post-divorce, this was the first time he had called, and her. She didn't know why she picked up. Maybe the painkillers had slowed her brain. Or maybe, in some deep, hidden corner, the heart that had been left behind still had the habit of trembling at the sight of her ex-husband's name. "Hello," Harrison's voice came through the line. Deep, steady, and so politely distant. "Mia, I'm marrying Chloe next week. If you're comfortable with it, I'd like you to come." It was a casual sentence, but it dropped onto her chest like an anvil. Mia stared up at the blank ceiling. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. It was strange. In the past, just one harsh word from him would send her hiding in the bathroom, crying until her eyes were bloodshot. Yet now, hearing him say he was marrying someone else, she only felt tired like someone who had walked through a hurricane, only to realize when the skies cleared that not a single part of her was left unbroken. "Yeah," she replied, her dry, cracked lips barely moving. "Congratulations." There was a pause on the other end. Harrison probably hadn't expected her to be so calm. "Are you doing all right?" Mia let out a very faint laugh, a pitifully small sound that cracked in her dry throat. "All right?" How could she be all right when she had just been sliced open to bring his daughter into the world? How could she be all right when, last night, as Sky let out her first cry, Mia had been trembling with happiness while simultaneously feeling so profoundly lonely she wanted to pass out? But she wouldn't say that. She was used to it, used to no one asking, and even if they did, not knowing how to answer. Sorry, I don't think I can make it. Mia tilted her head to look at her baby, her voice suddenly softening. I just had a baby. The other end of the line went dead silent. No background traffic, no distant voices, not even the sound of Harrison's breathing. The silence stretched, pulling taut and turning freezing cold. Then, he asked, every word dropping heavily from his lips. What did you just say? Mia closed her eyes. It was too late. Those few words had slipped from her mouth, as lightly as a breath, but they carried enough force to rip apart everything she had tried to hide for half a year. She quickly said, I'm tired. It has nothing to do with you. Mia, where are you? His voice was no longer composed. Something had shattered. In that cold, corporate tone, she heard the sound of a door opening, someone calling out, Harrison, your tuxedo fitting isn't done yet. And then his sharp snap, leave it. Mia's heart raced. She gripped her phone. Stop asking, I need to rest. Whose child is it? The question pierced straight through her. Mia looked at Sky. The baby was still sleeping soundly, her tiny mouth slightly pursed. In that moment, the features on her baby's face stood out clearly under the hospital lights. The forehead, the bridge of the nose, the curve of the lips. She looked so much like Harrison that Mia's chest tightened in agony. She didn't answer. She only said quickly, I'm hanging up, and ended the call. The room returned to silence, but it wasn't a soothing silence anymore. It was the heavy lull before a thunderstorm. Mia lay motionless, her hand resting on the edge of the bassinet, her palms slick with cold sweat. She cursed herself for being stupid. 6 months of hiding, and in 1 second of weakness, she had exposed everything. Across the city, in the VIP fitting room of a luxury downtown Seattle hotel, Harrison Vance stood frozen amidst rows of perfectly tailored suits. His assistant approached hesitantly, holding a tablet. Mr. Vance, Chloe is waiting. In the lobby. Should we head down? Harrison didn't answer. He opened an old text thread, scrolling rapidly until he stopped at a message his assistant had accidentally forwarded months ago. Puget. Sound Medical Center. Obstetrics. 3rd floor. All the color drained from his face. He grabbed his overcoat and walked straight toward the door. His assistant panicked and chased after him. Sir! The fitting! Harrison just threw a command over his shoulder, his voice hoarse and commanding. Call the hospital. Find out exactly what room Mia Anderson is in. Mia thought that after she hung up, things would temporarily settle. At least for a few hours. At least long enough for her to gather whatever meager strength she had lost during surgery. But some storms don't wait for nightfall to hit. Just one small crack in a person's defenses is enough to tear the whole sky open. Baby Sky was still sleeping in the hospital bassinet. She shifted slightly, her the Besozer, tiny fists clenching, her lips puckering as if dreaming of something sweet. Mia looked at her, trying to take a slow breath. Her incision throbbed, but the anxiety in her chest hurt far more. She was just reaching for a cup of water when the sound of fast, heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. It wasn't the soft squeak of a nurse's sneakers, nor the hesitant shuffle of a visiting relative. The footsteps struck the linoleum floor with a hard, relentless rhythm, like someone dragging a tempest straight toward her door. Mia stiffened. The door swung open. Harrison stood there. He was wearing a dark charcoal suit, the jacket tailored perfectly to his broad shoulders, a small fitting pin still stuck in the lapel. But his usual polished, aloof billionaire demeanor had been entirely upended by the Seattle rain. His shoulders were dark with water, his hair disheveled, strands sticking to his forehead. His face, usually an unreadable mask of composure, was ashen like a man who had just been handed a death sentence. He stood frozen at the threshold, his eyes landing on Mia. She lay on the hospital bed, her lips dry, her face almost translucent from blood loss, one hand taped with an IV line, the other desperately gripping the edge of the baby's swaddle. She looked so fragile that a strong gust of wind might shatter her. Yet, the look in her eyes as she stared at him was fiercely defensive. Harrison took a step inside, then another. His gaze shifted to the bassinet. Skye lay wrapped in a cream-colored hospital blanket, her face still red from birth, so tiny it made you afraid to breathe too loudly. But in that fragile, little form, there was something that made Harrison's blood run cold. That forehead, that nose, that stubbornly pursed little mouth. She looked like him. It was an absurd, undeniable resemblance. It was as if someone had taken a small fragment of his own face and placed it onto this fragile little life, forcing him to look directly at what he had thrown away. Harrison's throat went dry. Mia, his voice was raspy like gravel. What exactly have you been hiding from me? Mia didn't answer. She pulled the bassinet closer to the bed. It was a small movement, but it was enough to make her brow furrow in pain. Cold sweat beaded at her temples. She bit her lip, refusing to let out a sound. To her, the man standing there wasn't the father of her child, at least, not yet. He was the Harrison of the past. The man who had stayed silent while his wealthy mother scrutinized every outfit Mia wore and every meal she cooked. The man who looked at a few ambiguous photos and chose to trust his paranoia over her loyalty. The man who had signed the divorce papers with a face so cold she thought her heart had frozen to the desk. And now, here he was, standing in his wedding suit, about to marry another woman. Mia let out a faint laugh. She laughed, though her eyes were rimmed red. You got here fast. Harrison froze. The words were quiet but bitter, as a crushed pill under the tongue, the baby. He looked at her, then back at Skye. Whose is it? Mia tightened her grip on the blanket. Nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with me? He let out a harsh, breathless laugh that held no amusement whatsoever. Mia, do you think I'm blind? You've been blind for a long time. The room plunged into silence. Harrison looked at her. That one quiet, exhausted sentence felt like a knife to his chest. He took another step forward, his hand subconsciously reaching toward the bassinet. Maybe he just wanted a closer look. Maybe he wanted to touch that tiny face to make sure it wasn't a hallucination. But Mia reacted instantly. Like a mother bird cornered against a wall, she lunged her upper body forward, shielding the bassinet. Don't touch my daughter. The sudden movement felt like her incision was ripping open. Mia turned ghost pale, her body curling in agony. A muffled gasp tore from her lips, soft, but enough to stop Harrison in his tracks. His hand hovered in midair. He looked at her, clutching her stomach, the cold sweat running down her neck, her eyes wide with pain but still fiercely guarding the child from him. In that split second, the anger of being deceived drained out of him, replaced by a much heavier, darker feeling, fear. Not the fear of public embarrassment or being tricked, but the sheer terror of realizing he had truly abandoned her during a time when no one should have to walk alone. Harrison pulled his hand back. He turned and pressed the call button for the GATIC. Nurse. Mia looked at him, stunned, but she didn't relax. Seconds later, the triage nurse from earlier rushed in. Seeing a man in a wet, expensive suit standing like a statue, she paused. Are you the patient's family? Harrison's eyes flickered. Mia turned her face away, her voice painfully flat. No. The nurse looked awkwardly between them. Harrison's jaw tightened, his expression darkening, but he didn't argue. He just kept his voice low. She moved too fast. I think she hurt her incision. Please check her. The nurse quickly stepped up. She helped Mia lie back down. Every movement made Mia wince, her hands gripping the white hospital sheets until her knuckles were white. Baby Skye remained asleep, occasionally letting out a tiny sigh, acting as a fragile thread suspended between two adults consumed by a hurricane. Harrison backed up to the foot of the bed. He had never seen Mia like this. Weak, pale, utterly depleted. In his memory, she had been the woman who always smiled while making breakfast, humming indie folk songs while chopping vegetables. She was the one who threw open the blinds in his penthouse, declaring it was too dark and needed sunlight to feel like a home. Yet here she was, freshly cut open, lying next to a baby with his face. The nurse finished her checkup and sternly advised Mia not to make sudden movements, sit straight up, or hold the baby for too long. Mia nodded vaguely, while Harrison absorbed every single word, his face growing grimmer by the second. When the nurse left, the room held only 3 people, actually 4. An exhausted mother, a man in a wedding suit standing in shock, a newborn who didn't know she had just turned multiple lives upside down, and an old, heavy silence full of things never said. Harrison looked at Mia, his voice thick. "When did you give birth?" Mia closed her eyes. "Leave." "Mia." I said leave. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze with a cold, red-rimmed glare. "You're getting married next week. Don't stand in your ex-wife's hospital room looking like that. It's pathetic." Harrison looked like he'd been slapped. He glanced down at the boutonniere pin on his lapel. For the first time, he found it absolutely repulsive. Just then, Sky stirred. The loud talking must have startled her. The swaddle loosened, revealing her tiny face scrunching up in distress. Then, a cry erupted. It was a thin, newborn wail, but it sliced through the room like a cold blade. Harrison stared at the baby. He stared for a long time, his eyes wide, his pupils trembling. In that single moment, all his suspicion, anger, and pride were suffocated, because when that child cried, she looked even more like him. It was a cruel, undeniable reality. Harrison took a half step back, his lips parting, his voice barely a breath. "It's impossible." Sky's cries made the hospital room feel suffocatingly small. It was a weak, tiny sound, yet it hurt everywhere it touched. It pierced the thin white privacy, curtains, the sterile smell of alcohol, and the icy chasm between Mia and Harrison. The baby cried until she was red in the face, her tiny hands flailing in the blanket, searching for a familiar warmth in a world she had just entered that was already full of storms. Mia leaned over, hushing her daughter. "Shh, mommy's here, mommy's here." Her voice was thick with tears. She wanted to pick her baby up, press her to her chest like any other mother, but the stabbing pain in her abdomen turned every movement into a brutal struggle. She shifted agonizingly, slowly, her trembling hands adjusting the blanket. A hot tear fell from her cheek onto the baby's flushed skin. Harrison stood rooted to the spot, paralyzed like a man struck by lightning. He had imagined reuniting with Mia many times. He thought she might be thinner, colder, or look at him with resentment. He thought she might mock him or sarcastically wish him a happy marriage. He was fully prepared to hear her hurl insults at him when he called about the wedding, but never, not in his wildest dreams, did he imagine a baby. A newborn crying herself hoarse, bearing a face so identical to his that it couldn't be denied. Harrison felt his throat close up. He looked at Mia, then at Sky. Interrogations he had prepared were shoved back down his throat, crushing his pulsates. "Lungs." "The baby," he rasped, his voice low. "When was she born?" Mia kept her head down, soothing her child, not looking at him. "Nothing to do with you." That dry rejection hit the floor between them. In the past, Harrison would have been furious. He wasn't a man used to being rejected, let alone being told that something carrying his own blood was none of his business. But looking at this woman who had been under the knife less than 24 hours ago, pale as a sheet, arms bruised from IV needles, he couldn't muster an ounce of rage. He asked, much slower this time, "Mia, how long were you planning to hide this? From me?" She let out a short, exhausted laugh. "Until my daughter and I could live in peace. Every day away from you is a good day." Harrison frowned. "What do you think I'm going to do?" Mia finally looked up. Her eyes were red, but there was no pleading in them like there used to be. There was only exhaustion, guardedness, and a bone-chilling resolve. "Don't you know what your powerful family will do? What your mother will say? What your new bride will think? Do you really not know?" Harrison fell silent. The question dragged him back to the suffocating years of their marriage. His mother, Eleanor, scrutinizing every dress Mia bought, criticizing every meal she cooked, constantly asking why they weren't pregnant. Yet. And he had heard it all, yet chose to stay silent. He had thought silence would keep the peace. He didn't realize silence could be a weapon. Mia turned away, gently patting Sky. The baby slowly settled, leaving only soft, pathetic little hiccups. Harrison looked at his daughter, his heart twisting in knots. He needed an answer. Not because he didn't trust his own eyes, but because this truth was too massive. It was so huge that without absolute confirmation, he felt like he was going to lose his mind in this sterile room. Let's get a DNA test. Mia stiffened, her body snapping taut like an overstretched guitar string. What? Did you say? Harrison looked at her, his voice lowering. I need to be sure. Mia offered a bitter smile, her lips trembling slightly. Sure for what? So you can run back to your mother? So the Vance family can deploy their corporate lawyers? Or so your new bride knows how to dispose of us so we aren't an eyesore? Mia, don't say that. He cut her off, his voice not loud, but sharp. She is a newborn, Harrison. She's not a corporate asset you can audit, verify, and decide whether to acquire or liquidate. Harrison pressed his lips together, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. I never said I wouldn't accept her, but I am questioning. The words choked. Him. Mia stared at him for a long time. Finally, she took a deep breath, swallowing down all the humiliation trapped in her throat. Fine. You want a test? We do a test. But listen closely, Harrison. Everything goes through me. My attending doctor must be present. The sample must be sealed in front of me. I sign every document, and I keep an original copy of the results. Harrison looked at her. The woman in front of him was too weak to even sit up straight. Yet every word she spoke was an ironclad door slamming in the face of anyone who dared cross her boundaries. He suddenly realized the Mia of today was no longer the wife who bowed her head in his Seattle penthouse, forcing a smile to endure his mother's passive-aggressive insults. She had become a mother, and a mother pushed to the brink can be as soft as water or as sharp as broken glass. Harrison gave a slow nod. Fine. We do it your way. Mia hesitated. She had prepared herself for a fight, ready for time to issue orders and force her to back down. His immediate compliance only made her more anxious. Harrison pulled a sleek black business card from his wallet and placed it on her bedside table. His movements were incredibly slow, as if afraid a sudden gesture would wake the baby. This is my private concierge pediatrician. If the baby needs anything, call him. Mia didn't glance at the card. Harrison stood in silence for a few seconds. Before speaking, his voice gruffer. No matter how much you hate me, don't gamble with her health. Mia looked up. Don't worry. I might hate you, but I love my daughter more than my own life. The quiet sentence hit Harrison like a physical blow to the chest. He couldn't say another word. He just turned and walked out. The door clicked shut. Mia lay perfectly still for a long time. Then, she reached out, picking up the card. It bore the name of a top-tier Seattle pediatric specialist. She clenched it in her hand, squeezing until the cardstock dug into her palm. A part of her, I wanted to keep it. Another part feared that this delayed compassion would make her go soft. Finally, she yanked open the drawer, threw the card inside, and slammed it shut. Out in the hallway, Harrison had only taken a few steps when his phone vibrated. The caller ID read, Chloe. He stared at it for a few seconds before answering. Chloe's voice came through, as sweet as always, but every word felt like a needle under the skin. You're at the hospital with her, aren't you? Harrison stood in the middle of the corridor, holding the phone, his other hand still gripping his damp coat. The fluorescent lights washed over his face, highlighting his utter exhaustion. I have something to handle. Chloe let out a soft laugh, as if she wasn't angry at all. Handling things means bailing on our tuxedo, fitting and leaving me standing alone in the hotel lobby? Harrison closed his eyes. Chloe, I'll explain everything later. No need. Her voice stayed sweet, but chilled slightly. I'm already on my way. To the hospital. Harrison's eyes snapped open. Why are you coming here? To visit Mia, of course. Her answer was rapid, rehearsed. She used to be your wife, after all. I heard she just had a baby. It would be petty of me not to show up. The call ended before Harrison could say another word. Inside the hospital room, Mia had no idea what was happening outside. She was so tired her brain felt wrapped in dense fog. Baby Sky had taken a few ounces of formula a nurse brought in and was now back asleep, breathing softly. Mia was just starting to relax when a knock came at the door. Knock, knock. It was light, polite, but for some reason, the hair on the back of Mia's neck stood up. The door opened. A woman walked in, holding a highly curated, expensive bouquet of white hydrangeas. Chloe was wearing a pale blue crepe dress, her hair blown out perfectly, her makeup just enough to look effortlessly flawless without trying too hard. If a stranger walked in, they'd think she was just a remarkably gracious, upper-class woman visiting her fiancé's ex-wife out of the goodness of her heart. Mia stared at her. Chloe looked at Mia, then her eyes darted to the bassinet. In that split second, Chloe's perfect smile faltered. It was microscopic, like a pin dropping in water, but Mia caught it. Living with the Vance family had taught her how to read the malice hidden behind polished eyes. Chloe placed the flowers on the table. Mia, I heard the news. I just had to pop in and check on you. How are you holding up? Mia offered a cold half-smile. Do I look like I'm holding up well? Chloe blinked in feigned surprise, then chuckled softly. I'm just asking. Childbirth takes a toll on everyone. It does, Mia replied flatly, especially when you're alone. The temperature in the room plummeted. Chloe kept her smile glued in place as she stepped closer to the bassinet, but not too close, perfectly maintaining her polite boundaries. Baby Sky slept soundly. Chloe's eyes lingered on the baby's face a beat too long. She's cute, Chloe murmured. She looks familiar. Mia said nothing. Chloe looked up, her tone sickeningly sweet. But Mia, a child, needs a proper family name. I'm sure you don't want your daughter growing up with people whispering nasty things about her. Mia felt her hands go ice cold. That wasn't small talk. It was a threat wrapped in pristine white paper, exactly like the expensive bouquet on the table. Beautiful, fragrant, but suffocating. Mia looked her dead in the eye. Say what you came to say. I just had surgery. I don't have the energy to decode your passive aggression. The corner of Chloe's mouth twitched upward. I'm just worried about you. The timing is so tricky. Harrison and I are getting married. The invitations are out. The Seattle Times is doing a feature on us. The massive Bainbridge Resort merger between my family and his is about to be signed. Suddenly, you appear with a baby. People don't care about the truth, Mia. They just love a good scandal. Every word squeezed Mia's heart. She thought she was used to being misunderstood, but it turned out old wounds bleed easily when poked. Right then, the door swung open again. Harrison walked in, seeing Chloe standing over Mia's bed, while Mia clutched the blanket, pale as a ghost. His eyes darkened instantly. Chloe. Chloe turned around, her smile returning like she hadn't just been dripping. Poison. Oh, you're back. I was just keeping Mia company. Harrison looked at the white hydrangeas on the table, then at Mia. He lowered his voice. What did you say to her? Chloe tilted her head. Just girl talk. Why are you so tense? She stepped closer to him, dropping her voice just enough so Mia could still hear. Harrison, I know this is messy, but you have to think about both our families. The invites are out. The PR team has already booked the announcements. The resort merger is waiting for your signature. If you pull out now, it's not just a wedding you're canceling. Harrison said nothing. That silence was what hurt Mia the most. Not because she still hoped he would choose her, she had stopped hoping long ago, but his silence was exactly the same as before. The day his mother called her trash, the day the rumors claimed she cheated, the day she explained herself until her voice broke, and he just stood there like a brick wall. Mia looked down at Sky. The baby was innocent and tiny, yet she was already being placed on a scale against corporate mergers, high society weddings, and public relation. Chloe looked at Mia one last time. She walked to the bed, pretended to adjust the flowers, and leaned in close. Her voice dropped to a whisper only Mia could hear. You can give birth to her, Mia, but keeping her? That's a different story. A shiver of pure ice ran down Mia's spine. Chloe stood back up, her smile flawless. Get some rest. I won't bother you anymore. She walked out. Harrison followed. Out in the hallway, he grabbed her arm. Chloe, how did you know she was here? Chloe looked back, her eyes wide and innocent. Your assistant canceled the 5 Lake. Fitting in a panic. I just asked a few friends who sit on the hospital board. Is that so strange? It was a perfectly reasonable answer, but Harrison stared at her far longer than Usual. Inside the room, Mia lay completely still. The faint smell of the hydrangeas made her nauseous. She reached for her phone to call her best friend, Taylor. But the screen lit up first. A text from an unknown number. If you want your kid to be safe, don't let that DNA test happen. Mia didn't sleep a wink that night. The anonymous text sat on her screen, but the words kept stabbing her in the chest over and over. She read it once, twice. By the third time, her hands were freezing. Out in the hallway, the fluorescent lights hummed. The occasional squeak of a teen med cart, a baby crying nearby. The muffled whispers of visitors, it all felt incredibly real. Yet Mia felt like she was trapped in a nightmare where, if she closed her eyes for just 1 second, someone would snatch Sky away. She turned to look at her baby. Sky was in a light sleep, occasionally smacking her lips and waving her tiny fists. Mia gently stroked the back of her daughter's hand. Her skin was so soft, like a petal just dropped into the world, not yet used to. The wind. "Don't be afraid, baby," Mia whispered, even though she was the one terrified out of her mind. "Mommy's here." Near dawn, Taylor swung by. Taylor was her best friend from nursing school and worked on this very floor. She walked in and immediately frowned. "Good Lord. You look like a ghost. Did you sleep at all?" Mia handed her the phone. Taylor read the text, her expression instantly shifting. "Who the hell sent this?" "I don't know. Chloe? His family?" Mia looked at Sky, her voice bone dry. "All I know is my daughter isn't safe anymore." Taylor bit her lip, wanting to curse someone out, but seeing Mia post-surgery, she swallowed her anger. She pulled up a chair and lowered her voice. "Listen to me. Don't panic. If you panic, you lose. You want to keep your kid? You have to. Play this smart." Mia offered a tired smile. I'm trying so hard it hurts." Around 8 a.m., Mia's attending doctor walked in, accompanied by a pediatrician and a lab tech. They all wore white coats holding clipboards. Behind them was Harrison. He was still wearing the dress shirt from yesterday, minus the tie, his sleeves rolled up, dark circles under his eyes. He clearly hadn't slept, either. Mia locked eyes with him immediately. "You brought an entourage." Harrison didn't step too close. "I brought exactly what you asked for. Your attending is here. The sample will be sealed right now. You sign every single document." The attending doctor smiled gently. "Mia, along with the DNA swab, pediatrics, will just do a standard newborn check. We aren't doing anything without your consent. Rest easy." Rest easy. Those words sounded like a luxury right now. Mia took the clipboard, reading every line painstakingly slowly, so slow that the lab tech had to shift her weight. Harrison didn't rush her. He just stood quietly, watching them. When Mia finally signed, her hand shook, not because she didn't know what she was doing, but because she knew this ink was opening a door. Behind that door was the truth, but also potential custody battles, corporate lawyers, the Vance dynasty, and forces she couldn't fight alone. The pediatrician carefully lifted Sky. Woken from her nap, the baby scrunched her face in annoyance. When the buccal swab touched her cheek, she grunted, but when they did the heel prick for blood, her cry erupted sharp and piercing. Mia instinctively tried to lunge forward. "Gentle, please, be gentle." Her incision tore with pain, her vision going black at the edges. Taylor grabbed her shoulders, pushing her back down. "Mia, lay back. You just had major abdominal bastion. Surgery, don't be stupid." But Mia couldn't take her eyes off her baby's foot. A tiny drop of bright red blood soaked into the testing card, while Sky screamed until she turned purple. The cry wasn't loud, but in Mia's ears it was tearing her heart to shreds. Harrison stood rigidly, the veins in his hands bulging. He wanted to step forward, to pick the baby up, to tell her to stop crying, to say, "Daddy's here." But the word daddy was choked in his throat. He had no right to it. At least, not in Mia's eyes. The sample was sealed right in front of her. The doctor showed her the barcode, the confirmation sheet, and handed her the carbon copy. Only then did Harrison speak. "I've paid the lab to expedite. The official results will take a day or two. Until then, I won't let anyone from my family bother you." Mia pulled Sky back into her arms. The baby was still hiccuping, her face flushed. She didn't look at him, What about your fiancé? Harrison paused for a fraction of a second. I'll handle her. Mia let out a bitter chuckle. You said that in the past, too. Harrison stiffened. The air grew heavy. Taylor shot him a dirty look and didn't mince words. Mr. Vance, Mia needs to rest. If you have excuses, make them out. In the hallway. Don't stress out a post-op mother. Harrison looked at Mia for a long time, then nodded. Get some rest. He walked out, closing the door softly. That evening, Taylor returned with a hot container of soup and some postpartum supplies. She set them down and popped the lid. Eat. You look paler than the hospital sheets. Mia couldn't even force a smile. Tay, if the Vance family fights me for custody, can I win? Taylor paused. She didn't want to be brutally honest, but years of friendship meant she couldn't lie. It's tough. They have insane money, ruthless lawyers, judges in their pockets. You just gave birth, you're unemployed, your leases up soon. But tough doesn't mean impossible. You just have to be prepared. Got it? Mia looked at her sleeping baby, her voice barely a whisper. I'm not scared of being poor. I'm scared they'll take her. Taylor pulled her chair closer. Then don't go back to your crappy apartment. I know a private postpartum retreat in Bellevue. It's gated, security 24/7, highly confidential. Once you're discharged, you go there. Mia stayed silent, then nodded. Outside, the night swallowed Seattle. The rain had stopped, but the glass was still streaked with water, like a sky that had cried but hadn't wiped its face. Before Taylor left, she leaned down to adjust Sky's blanket. Then, moving very quickly, she slipped a small piece of paper into Mia's hand. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Don't tell anyone. Tomorrow morning, if you want to run, I'll sneak you out the loading dock. Mia held the piece of paper all night, too terrified to sleep. It was just a sticky note with a few scribbled lines. 5:15 a.m. East Wing loading dock. Black. Suburban. Driver is Frank. But to Mia, it felt like a golden ticket out of a whirlpool about to swallow her alive. Outside, the Seattle streets were eerily quiet. Streetlights cast a sickly yellow glow on the wet pavement. Occasionally, an ambulance siren wailed in the distance before fading into the cold fog. Sky slept right next to her, breathing lightly. She was so small, so defenseless, that just looking at her made Mia's chest ache. She gently stroked her daughter's cheek. I'm sorry, baby. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. The words tasted bitter. On one hand, Harrison had promised to keep his family away. On the other, the anonymous text, Chloe's razor-thin smile, and Taylor's warning. You have to play this smart. Mia didn't know who to trust. I knew that if she laid there like a sitting duck, waiting for others to decide her fate, she would become the old Mia again. Silent, enduring, and ultimately, losing everything. At 5 a.m., Taylor slipped into the room. She was wearing a trench coat over her, scrubs, her hair in a messy bun, eyes dark from the night shift. Seeing Mia, already sitting up, she immediately signaled her to slow down. Easy, you just had surgery. Don't play the hero. Mia forced a smile. What hero? I'm terrified. Taylor sighed, helping her put on a thick cardigan. Terrified but stubborn. Classic mom energy. You look weak, but you've got a head like a rock. The joke coaxed a tiny laugh from Mia, but it faded the moment she began. Bundling Sky into a thick blanket, the baby woke up, grunting in annoyance. Mia instantly pressed her cheek to her baby's forehead. Be good, sweetie. Mommy's taking us somewhere safe. Just be good. Taylor had already prepared the transfer paperwork for the postpartum center. The official reason was listed as a voluntary transfer to an affiliated recovery clinic. It wasn't an illegal escape. It was completely legitimate, yet Mia's heart pounded like a criminal's. She carried the baby in one arm, pulling her small suitcase with the other. Every step sent shards of glass through her abdomen. Cold sweat gathered at the nape of her neck. Taylor tried to take the suitcase, but Mia shook her head. I'll do it. If anyone asks, I don't want you. Implicated. Taylor rolled her eyes. Shut up. I'm your best friend, not an Uber driver. Mia smiled through the pain. The two walked through the corridors during shift. Change. The fluorescent lights were bright, but the air felt heavy. A janitor, pushing a cart, looked at Mia and asked, Discharging early? Taylor answered smoothly, transferring to the Bellevue Recovery Center. Paperwork's approved. The janitor nodded, but the look in her eyes sent a chill down Mia's spine. She pulled the blanket tighter around Sky. The loading dock appeared at the end of the hall. The sky was just beginning to turn a bruised purple. The air was biting cold. A black Suburban idled in the alleyway. The driver, Frank, waved when he saw Taylor. Mia let out a massive breath of relief. Suddenly, blinding headlights washed over them. A massive Range Rover blocked the alley exit silent and imposing as a steel wall. The door opened, and Harrison stepped out. He was still in his wrinkled dress shirt. His hair was a mess, his eyes bloodshot, but his tall, broad frame standing in the Seattle fog made Mia feel like she had just been cut off by a tidal wave. Taylor stepped in front of Mia immediately. "Harrison, what the hell are you doing? She just had a C-section. Are you trying to give her a heart attack?" Harrison ignored Taylor. His eyes locked onto Mia's pale face, then dropped to the bundle in her arms. He stepped forward. "You're having me followed." Mia's voice was stretched thin, hoarse and sharp. Harrison stopped. He didn't try to grab the baby, nor did he pull Mia. He simply took off his heavy wool coat and draped it gently over Mia and the baby to block the freezing wind. "I got an alert from hospital billing. When you filed for a transfer, they notified the financial guarantor." Mia bit her lip. "So you're controlling my medical bills too?" "No." He frowned, his voice dropping. "I was terrified you were going to hurt yourself traveling right after surgery." "Hurt myself?" Mia let out a hollow laugh, her eyes red. "Staying here is what's going to hurt me. Anonymous threats, Chloe. Your mother. Even you. I don't know who actually wants to protect my daughter." Harrison stayed silent for a moment. Then he pulled out his phone, pulling up an epinephrine N email and showing it to her, keeping enough distance so she didn't feel trapped. "I just got the preliminary report from the lab. The official document isn't printed yet, but the DNA match is 99.9%. Mia's ears rang. The morning wind whipped through the alley, feeling like the hand against her neck. Sky started to fuss in the blankets, her tiny mouth trembling as she geared up to cry. Mia held her tighter, the incision burning. Harrison looked at her, his voice rough. "Mia, she is my daughter." "So what?" she fired back, tears welling up but refusing to fall. "Are you going to drag her to the Vance estate? Are you going to let your mother decide what her name is, where she goes to school, and whether I'm fit to raise her? I'm not forcing you to go back to my family. Then what do you want?" Harrison looked straight into her eyes. In the pale gray dawn, his usual icy, corporate armor seemed to crack, revealing a very real, very raw exhaustion. "I want you to stop walking into a trap. Mia Froze." He spoke slowly, enunciating every word. "Someone out there wants you to vanish. With the baby. If you get in that black car right now, all they need is one photo. You become the deranged ex-wife fleeing with an heir. Are you absolutely certain the person who sent you that anonymous text was trying to help you?" His question left Mia paralyzed in the cold alley. "Are you sure the person who texted you was trying to help you?" Sky began to wail, a weak, pitiful sound against the wind. The cry snapped Mia out of her panic. She looked down at her baby, her heart breaking. Her daughter was cold and hungry. Despite all the mistrust in her heart, Mia knew that if they stood here fighting, the one who would suffer most wasn't Harrison or herself, but Sky. Taylor, still shielding Mia, glared at Harrison. "That's a nice speech, but how do we know where you're taking them?" Harrison looked at Taylor, surprisingly not annoyed. His voice was raspy from Tane's lack of sleep, but firm. "I have a private house on Bainbridge Island, not the family estate. My mother isn't there. Chloe's people aren't there. If Mia wants, she can go there." Taylor raised an eyebrow. "Really? Or will you lock the doors once we get there?" Harrison looked back at Mia. "I won't touch your phone. I won't lock the doors. I won't isolate you. Taylor can stay with you for a few days if you want. I just want you and the baby somewhere safer than a public hospital." Mia clutched her baby, the incision screaming in protest. She hated this feeling. She hated having to weigh her options when she couldn't even stand up straight. She hated that even when trying to run, she had to calculate the PR optics so she wouldn't be branded a criminal. Gold-digging ex flees with billionaire's baby to extort family. The headlines hadn't even been written, but she could already hear them scraping like razors against glass. Sky cried louder. Mia closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked at Harrison, her voice exhausted but unyielding. I'll get in your car. But Taylor follows in hers, and I keep all of Sky's documents. Harrison nodded immediately. Done. And you don't pick her up without my permission. He paused for a beat, then said, Done. Taylor grabbed Mia's arm, whispering in her ear. Are you sure? Mia looked at Sky, whose face was red from crying. Her eyes burned. I'm not sure of anything. But my baby is freezing. That shut Taylor up. Harrison opened the passenger door of his SUV. He instinctively reached out to help Mia up. But the moment she flinched backward, he froze, then slowly pulled his hand away. He just stood there holding the door, so she could climb in herself. It was a tiny gesture, but Mia noticed. In the 40s, nay 2, past, Harrison controlled everything. He opened doors, pulled out chairs, picked restaurants, and dictated how they resolved arguments. He always thought he was doing what was best. But to Mia, his best often felt like a velvet net soft, but the more you struggled, the more you suffocated. The SUV left the hospital as the sun fully rose. Seattle after the rain was crisp and pale. The pine trees lining the highway dripped with water. The city was waking up coffee shops, turning on their neon signs, commuters getting on the freeway. The normalcy of it all made Mia's stomach churn. Harrison sat in the driver's seat, occasionally checking the rearview mirror. He didn't speak. His phone, sitting in the cup holder, kept lighting up continuously. Chloe, Mom, Chloe, Mom. Every time the screen glowed, Mia saw it. And every time, Harrison just glanced at it for a second before placing it face down. Finally, as they drove onto the Bainbridge ferry, Chloe's name flashed again. This time, he powered the phone off completely. Mia gave a weak, mocking smile. Not answering? Your bride must be getting anxious. Harrison stayed quiet for a few seconds. Now is not the time. Then when is the time? She looked out the window at the Puget Sound, her voice light as the wind but incredibly bitter. When the wedding invites are fully RSVP'd? Or when your mother shows up with a checkbook asking how much it'll cost? To make me disappear? Harrison looked at her through the mirror, his eyes heavy with fatigue. Mia, I know you don't trust me. You're stating the obvious. In the back, Taylor, who had joined them in the SUV while Frank drove her car, back coughed awkwardly. The tension in the car was thick enough to cut with a knife. Baby Sky had been fed a small bottle Taylor had prepared and was now passed out in her car seat. Mia looked at her daughter, forcing herself to swallow down the harsher words she wanted to say. She didn't want to wake the great baby. The house on Bainbridge Island sat on a quiet road overlooking the water. A trellis of purple wisteria draped over the front gate, the wet petals scattered across the cobblestone driveway. The ocean breeze brought the smell of salt and pine, a stark contrast to the hospital. If it were any other day, any other life, Mia might have found this place beautiful. Today, she only felt dread. Harrison opened the door. A middle-aged postpartum doula and an older housekeeper were already waiting inside. They greeted Mia softly, asking no questions. The master suite on the ground floor had been completely converted, so Mia wouldn't have to use the stairs. There was a white crib, a high-end bottle, sterilizer, stacks of diapers, organic newborn clothes, her prescribed painkillers, even a specialized postpartum nursing pillow. Everything was too perfect, too perfectly timed. Mia laid Sky down in the crib and looked around. Morning sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains, casting a warm glow on the hardwood floor. This room was warmer than the hospital, softer, quieter. But in her heart, this peace felt like a cage lined with velvet. She turned to him. When did you prepare all of this? Harrison stood by the door, his shirt wrinkled, looking utterly exhausted, but his eyes never left her and the baby. Since I left your hospital room, Mia stared at him. You weren't even sure she was yours then. Yeah, he answered softly. I wasn't sure, but I knew you just had major surgery and shouldn't be lying in that hospital alone. That sentence made Mia freeze. It wasn't enough to erase the pain, nor was it enough to make her trust him, but it felt like a very light touch on an old, gaping wound, making her simultaneously want to smack his hand away and shudder. At the warmth, she looked away. Don't talk like you've cared about me this whole time. Harrison remained silent. This time, he didn't argue. Just then, his backup phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from Chloe lit up the screen. If you cancel the wedding for that kid, I will make sure the whole city knows how Mia ruined our big day. Mia couldn't sleep her first night at the beach house. Outside, the waves crashed rhythmically against the shore, pulling back like a hand patiently, stroking the dark sand. The sea breeze slipped through the cracks in the window, bringing a faint chill. The room was safe, but Mia had locked the bedroom door. Anyway, not because she thought Harrison would barge in, but because after everything, she needed the physical click of a lock to remind herself that, tonight, she still had the power to set a boundary. Sky slept in the bassinet next to the bed. The baby was restless, occasionally, scrunching her face, her tiny hands swatting at the air. Mia turned on her side to watch her daughter, feeling her heart melt like sugar in warm water. Go to sleep, sweetie, she whispered. Mommy's right here. Taylor was sleeping in the guest room down the hall. Before turning in, Taylor had stood with her hands on her hips, ordering, if you need anything, call me. Do not try to be a martyr. If you pass out from the pain, I will literally yell at your unconscious body. Mia had just offered a tired smile. Taylor's blunt, slightly abrasive way of caring actually made her feel safer than any polished, poetic comforting ever could. But around midnight, Sky suddenly started screaming. At first, it was just a few grunts. Then the cry escalated, fast and piercing, sawing away at the nerves of a mother recovering from surgery. Panic-stricken, Mia forced herself to sit up. The incision screamed in agony and she bit her lip so hard it bled. What's wrong? Are you hungry? Gas? She clumsily picked the baby up. Her body was weak, her hands shook, and her milk hadn't fully come in yet. Sky cried harder, turning beet red, her little legs kicking against the swaddle. Mia felt a wave of immense love mixed with total helplessness. Tears spilled down her face before she could wipe them. Oh, baby, I'm sorry. Mommy doesn't know what she's doing. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Knock, knock. Mia stiffened. Harrison's voice came from the hallway, very low, very hesitant. Mia, I made a bottle. The doula showed me how. Can I come in? She stayed quiet. In the past, he would have just walked in, or used his commanding CEO voice to demand entry. But tonight, he stood outside, waiting for permission. Sky was crying so hard she was losing her voice. Mia closed her eyes, swallowed her pride, and said softly, come in. The door opened. Harrison walked in holding a warm bottle. He had changed into a dark t-shirt. His hair was messy, and the dark circles under his eyes were prominent. Looking at him now, he didn't resemble the ruthless real estate mogul who made developers tremble. He looked like a man violently thrown into a crash. Course on fatherhood, without a textbook to save him. He set the bottle on the nightstand, deliberately not touching the baby without permission. I tested the temperature. The doula said to drop it on the wrist. It feels warm, but you should check it. His tone was awkward, almost comical. Mia took the bottle, tested it on her. Wrist, it was perfect. She didn't praise him, just quietly guided the nipple to Sky's mouth. Sky latched immediately. The screaming subsided into pitiful, little hiccups. Harrison stood by the bed watching intently, as if witnessing the greatest miracle of his life. After a few minutes, Sky's drinking slowed, and she let out a loud burp hiccup. Mia tried to shift her posture to burp the baby, but her arms were trembling. Violently, Harrison noticed. Can I hold her for a minute? Mia looked up. Her eyes still held deep suspicion, but after a few seconds, she nodded exhaustedly. Support her neck first, the other hand on her lower back. Don't press her tummy. Be gentle. Harrison reached out, his movements stiff as a board. When Sky was placed into his arms, he looked like he completely stopped breathing. He held the baby like he was holding a sliver of the moon that had just fallen into his hands, terrified that if he squeezed too hard, she would shatter. Mia couldn't help but interject. Relax your shoulders. You're stiff as a log. It makes her uncomfortable. Harrison paused. Right. I know. If you don't know, just say you don't know. Stop saying I know just to say it. This time, he didn't get angry. He just looked down, clumsily trying to adjust his grip. I really don't know. Teach me. Those words silenced Mia. He really didn't know. And for the first time in his life, he was admitting it. She taught him how to rest the baby against his shoulder, how to pat her back in a slow, rhythmic rhythm. Harrison followed her. Instructions clumsy but incredibly patient. 1 beat, 2 beats, 3 beats. Sky finally stopped crying entirely, her tiny head resting on his shoulder, her warm breath puffing against his shirt. The room grew quiet. Under the dim amber glow of the nightlight, Harrison looked down at his daughter, his eyes softening more than Mia had ever seen. Watching them, Mia felt a sharp stab in her chest. Delayed tenderness sometimes hurts, more than coldness, because it forces you to ask, if you had known how to lower your voice back then, if you had known how to listen, if you had just said, I don't know, teach me, would everything have been different? The next morning, Mia woke up to the sound of seagulls outside the window. On the table next to the bassinet was a brand new notebook. The first page was filled with Harrison's handwriting, neat, but a little rigid. Day 1, bringing Sky home. Cried at 1:17 a.m. Ate 2 ounces, burped for 8 minutes, then slept. Dad is clueless, but Dad will learn. Mia read it, and her eyes burned. She snapped the notebook shut quickly, terrified that if she waited 1 second longer, her resolve would melt. Just then, Taylor peeked out the window, pulling the curtains back. Her brow furrowed. Mia, there's a strange car parked out front. Harrison immediately went out to check. The black luxury sedan idled at the gate, for a moment before quietly driving off. When Harrison walked back inside, his face was like thunder. His phone rang. It was his mother, Eleanor Vance. Harrison answered. Eleanor's voice came through the speaker, crisp and commanding. Bring the child to the family estate immediately. A Vance heir will not be kept in some random beach house with a woman of no status. Mia clutched Sky, her face draining of color. Harrison looked at Mia, then at the sleeping baby. For the first time, he didn't deflect. He put the phone on speaker, his voice deep but crystal clear. If you want to see your granddaughter, you can come visit. But no one is taking this child anywhere without Mia's explicit consent. As soon as Harrison finished speaking, it felt as though all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Mia stood by the bassinet, her hand resting on the baby's blanket. She heard every single word he said to his mother through the speakerphone. No one is taking this child anywhere without Mia's explicit consent. It was clear, calm, and evasive of nothing. Yet Mia felt her nose sting. Back in the massive Vance estate in Medina, she had prayed to hear a sentence like that. How many times had Eleanor mocked her middle-class background? How many times had she shoved vile-tasting holistic fertility supplements across the table, sneering that a woman marrying into wealth was useless if she couldn't produce? An heir? When Mia sat alone at the dining table enduring words that cut like glass, Harrison had just sat there, silently scrolling through emails on his phone, as if his silence was the diplomatic way to keep the peace. It turns out, protection that comes too late can break a person's heart all over. Again. On the other end of the line, Eleanor's voice turned to ice. Are you speaking to your mother in that tone? Harrison looked at the baby sleeping in the crib. I'm just making things clear. Clear about what? A child carrying the Vance name left outside with your ex-wife. No legal status. No public acknowledgement. No one knowing where she's came from. You think this is acceptable? Mia's hand tightened on the crib. Harrison didn't look at her, but his voice dropped an octave. Mia just had major surgery. The baby is barely days old. The only thing that matters right now is their health. Eleanor let out a dry scoff. I'm coming over. The call disconnected abruptly. No one said anything for a few seconds. Taylor stood by the door, arms crossed, scowling. Well, Category 5 hurricane incoming. Mia glanced at her friend, too exhausted to even muster a real laugh. Don't even start. My head is splitting. If your ex-monster-in-law shows up, you leave her to me, Taylor said. She says one out-of-line thing. I'll bite her head off. Harrison turned to her. You won't need to. I will handle her. Taylor looked him up and down, scoffing. I hope you mean it this time, because Back when Mia lived in your house, you were awfully quiet. Harrison stiffened. He didn't argue. That afternoon, Eleanor Vance arrived. A sleek black Maybach pulled up to the gate of the Bainbridge house. The door opened, and she stepped out wearing a tailored navy cashmere coat, her hair impeccably blown out, a strand of Mikimoto, pearls around her neck. She didn't rush, she wasn't loud, but every step she took made it feel like she owned the very ground she walked on. Behind her came her driver, an older assistant, and several shopping bags, high-end organic baby, clothes with the tag still on, imported European formulas, cashmere blankets, and sitting on top, a small red velvet Cartier box. Eleanor walked into the living room, her eyes sweeping over the house, the wisteria on the porch, the small bassinet by the window, and finally landing on Mia. No hug, no asking how her surgery went, not a single drop of basic human decency. She simply said, "This place is quiet, but it's not a suitable environment for the heiress of the Vance family to grow up in." Mia was sitting on the sofa, baby Sky in her arms. She was propped up by pillows to ease the strain on her back, her face still lacking any real color. But hearing that, she lifted her chin. "She's just a baby. I haven't fully recovered yet. We can talk about the future later, Mrs. Vance." Eleanor narrowed her eyes. Mrs. Vance. Mia used to call her mom. She had called her that for 2 years, even when the word caught like a fishbone in her throat. Now, after the divorce papers, after months of hiding a pregnancy alone, I couldn't bring herself to say it anymore. Harrison stood by the window. His expression shifted slightly, but he didn't force Mia to correct herself. Eleanor gave a patronizing smile. "Fine. Call me whatever you want. I'll be direct. The preliminary DNA results are back. We are just waiting for the clue. Notarized documents. Vance blood requires Vance status. I am taking the child back to the main estate for a few days so her grandparents can look after her, and so my lawyers can draw up the paperwork to legally change her last name to Vance." Mia instantly clutched Sky tighter. "Absolutely not." The room fell dead silent. Eleanor stared at her, eyes freezing over. "What did you say?" "She was just born. She needs her mother." Mia struggled to keep her voice from shaking. "I just got cut open. I cannot be separated from her. Do you think the Vance family lacks staff? We have nannies, concierge, pediatricians, night nurses. We can get as many as we want, but she only has one mother." Mia shot back. The moment the words left her mouth, Taylor, standing in the back, almost yelled, "Damn right," but swallowed it down. Harrison looked at Mia, a flicker of something profound crossing his eyes. Eleanor placed the red Cartier box on the coffee table. Inside was a solid gold infant bracelet. "I didn't come here to argue. I came to make you understand. You had a hard labor, I acknowledge that. But don't for 1 second think that, just because you birthed this child, you can use her to blackmail Harrison into ruining his merger with Chloe's family and forcing your way back into high society." Mia felt her throat close up. She stared at the older woman for a long time. "Do you honestly think I want to step foot back into your world?" Eleanor paused. Mia let out a soft laugh. It was pale and exhausted, but completely devoid of cowardice. "The day I signed the divorce papers, I walked out for good. When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't call Harrison. When I lay on the operating table with the emergency contact line blank, I still didn't call anyone. If I wanted to blackmail your family, I wouldn't have stayed silent until today." Eleanor pursed her lips. Harrison stepped forward, physically placing himself between his mother and the sofa where Mia sat. "Mom, enough." He spoke in a low, unwavering tone. "Sky stays with Mia. Every single decision regarding this child goes through her. If you want to visit your granddaughter, I won't stop you. But you will not speak to the woman who just gave birth to my child like that." Eleanor stared at her son, furious and in disbelief. "You're speaking to your mother like this? For her?" Harrison stayed silent for a second. "Because I don't want to make the same mistake twice." Mia froze. Eleanor stood up abruptly. Her assistant rushed forward to help her, but she swatted him away. Before leaving, she turned back to Mia, her voice like a scalpel. "You can keep her today. But remember, if this goes to family court, maternal love is not the only asset a judge looks at. The door slammed. The house returned to silence, but the silence felt as heavy as lead. Mia looked down at Sky. The baby was still sleeping, oblivious to the barred fact that the adults were dragging her into a war over status and power. Taylor peeked through the blinds, her face dropping. Mia, that weird car from this morning is parked outside again. Harrison immediately walked to the door, but the car was already pulling away. That night, as the lights in the house clicked on, Harrison's phone buzzed. An unknown number sent him a photo. In the picture, Mia was clutching Sky outside, the hospital loading dock at dawn, her face pale, pulling a suitcase. Underneath, the photo was a caption: "If this photo gets out, she becomes the psycho ex-wife, kidnapping a baby to extort your family." Harrison stared at the screen, a cold chill running down his spine. The photo of Mia at the loading dock sat on Harrison's phone all night, like a thorn buried under his skin. He knew perfectly well the photo was out of context, but he also knew the American media cycle didn't care about context. They just needed a blurry image and a scandalous headline to destroy someone. He didn't tell Mia right away. She had just given birth, and after his mother's brutal visit, he was afraid one more shock would break her completely. But his silence didn't slip past Mia. The next morning, after the visiting nurse checked on Sky, Mia noticed Harrison standing on the deck taking a phone call, his voice low and urgent. His back was turned, but his knuckles were white as he gripped his phone. When he walked back in, she asked, "What are you hiding from me?" Harrison paused. "Nothing." Mia gave a bitter smile. "You're still as terrible at lying as you used to be." That shut him up. Before he could explain, the doorbell rang. The housekeeper brought in a thick manila envelope and said a courier specifically demanded it be handed to Mia. There was no return address, just the words "Legal Counsel" stamped on the front. Mia opened it. Inside was a draft petition for sole physical and legal custody of baby Sky. The petitioner was Eleanor Vance's high-powered Seattle law firm. Mia read through the pages, her hands turning to ice. Unemployed, unstable, housing, exhibiting erratic behavior by attempting to flee the hospital against medical advice post-surgery. Every line contained a grain of truth, but strung. Together, they painted her as an unstable, negligent mother, unfit to protect her child. She sat completely still on the sofa. Sky was sleeping in the bassinet. The legal papers lay on her lap, but Mia felt like they were wrapping around her throat, choking her. Taylor grabbed the papers and read them, her face turning crimson with rage. These absolute bastards! When you were going to ultrasound appointments alone, they were nowhere. Now that she's born, they send lawyers to teach you how to be a mother? Harrison snatched the papers, his expression turning murderous. He immediately dialed his mother. "Mom, call the lawyers off." Whatever Eleanor said made Harrison grind his jaw. "If you file this, I will testify in court that Mia never endangered the child. Her hospital transfer was completely legal, and I was there helping her." A long silence. He hung up, his eyes cold. Mia looked at him. "What did she say?" "She said she's doing this for her granddaughter's future," Harrison said, quietly. Mia let out a laugh, her eyes red. Her future? A future without her mother? No one had an answer. By noon, Mia got a text from Chloe. The tone was sickly sweet, asking to meet for coffee just to clear the air and stop things from getting out of hand. Mia. It was about to delete it, but Taylor stopped her. "No, I'm going with you. Let's see what kind of play she's making." "Tay, I'm so tired. If we ignore her, she'll just say I'm scared. But I don't have the energy." "Which is why I'm going," Taylor said, holding up her phone. "And I'm hitting record. We don't play stupid games anymore." Mia told Harrison the location. He didn't try to stop her, only insisted the driver take them and that he would wait in a car nearby. She hated feeling like she was under surveillance, but this time, she didn't refuse. The coffee shop was tucked away in a quiet, affluent neighborhood in Bellevue, covered in creeping jasmine vines. Chloe was already sitting in a corner booth. She wore a pale yellow sundress, looking every bit the elegant socialite who had just survived a canceled wedding with grace. "Mia, you made it," Chloe smiled. Mia sat down. Taylor slid into the booth next to her, crossing her arms. "Get to the point," My friend just had major surgery. We aren't here for a tea party. Chloe kept smiling. I just want this to end peacefully. Take a settlement. Move to a different state with the baby for a few years. Let Harrison handle the PR, mess and his family. It'll be so much easier for you. Mia stared at her. Easier for me or easier for you? Chloe's smile faltered for a second before returning. Don't take this the wrong way. I'm offering you an out. The timing is so bad. Plus, the hospital records show you flagged high on the postpartum depression screening, right? You have no job, your lease is up, and running out of a hospital at 5 a.m. If this goes to a judge, it won't look good. Mia felt her chest tighten. Everything she had endured, the terror that kept her awake at night, was now being twisted by Chloe into a weapon to stab her with. Taylor gritted her teeth. You sound so nice, but your mouth is full of venom. Chloe looked at Taylor, still smiling. I'm just speaking facts. She turned back to Mia, her voice dropping lower. You've always been like this, Mia. Just like at the Cascades Hotel. You really think just because you're innocent, people will believe you? Mia froze. The Cascades Hotel. The name was like a rusted knife pulled from an old wound. 6 months ago, photos of her meeting a male client in the lobby of that hotel had convinced Harrison she was having an affair. She had explained, cried, and begged him to believe her, but she got divorce papers in return. But the hotel incident was kept strictly private. Almost no one knew the details. How did Chloe know? Taylor immediately shot Mia a look. Mia said nothing, but lightly tapped her purse, where her phone was silently recording everything. The meeting ended in freezing hostility. That night, Harrison received the audio file from Taylor. He sat alone in his home office, the only light coming from a desk lamp. Outside, the ocean waves rolled in the dark. On his computer monitor were the old photos from the ILA ed. Cascades Hotel, the marble lobby, the potted plants near the elevators, Mia, standing next to a man in a white dress shirt holding architectural blueprints. The angle of the photo was incredibly deliberate, making them look far more intimate than they were. Back then, he had glanced at the photos and believed them. He leaned back in his stock, leather chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose as the memory hit him like a bucket of ice water. Mia had stood in front of him, her eyes red, voice trembling. I didn't cheat on you. He's an old client he wanted me to look at. Condo designs. Call him if you don't believe me. What had he said? Oh, right. Enough, Mia. I don't want to hear your lies. 1 sentence, and he had pushed her off a cliff. His phone buzzed. His assistant. Mr. Vance, I found Martha's address. Your mother's old housekeeper. She retired to a small town in Oregon. I called her, but she said she didn't want to get involved in Vance family drama. Harrison opened his eyes, his voice gravelly. Give me her number. Half an hour later, the call connected. An older woman's hesitant voice answered. Hello, Mr. Harrison? Martha. I'm sorry to call so late. I need to ask you about Mia. Silence on the line. It's in the past. Why ask now? Harrison gripped the phone. Because I made a terrible mistake, and someone is using that mistake to destroy her again. Martha let out a heavy sigh, sounding like someone who had carried a secret for far too long. When Miss Mia was kicked out, I wanted to say something, but my mother forbade it. She fired me shortly after. I was scared. I didn't want trouble. Whatever you know, please tell me. A long pause. Then Martha spoke. I have a recording. That day, Miss Chloe came over and was talking on the phone on the patio. I was hanging laundry and heard her. It sounded so wicked, I pulled out my phone and recorded it. I didn't think Miss Mia would actually get thrown out. The next morning, his assistant brought the audio file. Harrison sat in his car, plugging in his AirPods. At first, just the sound of wind and rustling leaves. Then, Chloe's voice. Soft, sweet, but chilling to the bone. Just take the photos from the elevator angle. Make it look intimate. Yes, I got. To her to the Cascades Hotel, under the guise of a client meeting. She won't suspect a thing. Send them straight to Harrison. A man with his ego? Once the seed of doubt is planted, he won't listen to a word she says. Harrison felt his blood run cold. He pulled the AirPods out, but Chloe's voice echoed in his head. A man with his ego? Once the seed of doubt is planted, he Won't listen to a word she says. She had understood him perfectly. Understood his pride, his coldness, and exactly how he would use his silence to kill his own marriage. And he had played right into her hands. That afternoon, Harrison played the recording for Mia. She was sitting next to Sky's crib. The late afternoon sun caught her shoulders, but she still looked so pale. After the recording ended, Mia didn't cry. She didn't scream at him. She just sat so still it scared him. Sky slept in the crib occasionally, smacking her lips. The baby's soft breathing made the heavy silence in the room even more painful. Harrison stood in front of her, his throat burning. "Mia, I'm so sorry." She didn't look at him. He took a step forward, his voice cracking. "I am a total bastard." Mia finally looked up. Her eyes weren't fierce or full of screaming resentment. They were empty, exhausted. Like a well that had too many stones thrown into it, no longer capable of making a ripple. "Do you know?" she said very quietly. "That day, I stood outside your office in the rain for 3 hours. Just to tell you I didn't do anything wrong." Harrison bowed his head. "Do you remember?" "No, you don't." Mia gave a hollow laugh, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "If you remembered, you wouldn't have let me sign those divorce papers alone. You wouldn't have let me find out I was pregnant and be so terrified of you that I didn't call. You wouldn't have let our daughter be born in an operating room with a blank emergency contact form." Her words weren't loud, but they beat him down harder than any physical blow. Harrison wanted to say something, to explain that he had hurt too, that he thought he was betrayed, but he knew any excuse right now would just be cowardice. Mia looked down at Sky, and the tears finally fell in silence. "If you had just believed me, just once, our daughter wouldn't have had to come into the world completely alone." Harrison stood paralyzed. He understood now. The truth could clear her name, but it couldn't give her back the nights she held her pregnant belly alone. It couldn't give back the times she had leg cramps at 3 a.m. with no one to massage them. It couldn't give back the moment she heard her baby's first cry, overwhelmed with joy, turning her head only to find no one there to share it with. His phone suddenly vibrated. It was his assistant. Harrison answered, his voice raspy. The voice on the other end was panicked. "Sir, we have a massive problem. A blind item just dropped on a major Seattle gossip blog, and it's going viral on TikTok." "What's the headline?" Harrison closed his eyes. The assistant hesitated. "Ex-wife uses secret baby to extort real estate CEO and ruin high society wedding." The article spread faster than a wildfire. It started on a local gossip blog, complete with the blurry photo of Mia leaving the hospital at dawn with a suitcase, looking disheveled. Then local Facebook groups picked it up. People added their own commentary, subtracting facts, until the story morphed into an absolute monster. Mia sat on her bed, scrolling through her phone, staring at the headline for a long time. Next to her, Sky was sleeping, completely unaware that the world was using her existence to tear her mother to shreds. Unaware that strangers who had never met Mia, who had never seen her undergo surgery alone, were gleefully calling her every vile name in the book. She scrolled through the comments. "Wow, women are terrifying. Hid the kid until his wedding day just to ruin it. Who knows whose kid it is? Look at her running. Out of the hospital? Guilty much? She just wants a massive payout. No one loves a kid enough to pull a stunt like that." Mia locked her phone. The screen went black, but the words still crawled over, her skin cold and filthy. She wasn't afraid of being insulted as much as she was terrified that one day, Sky would grow up, read these comments, and ask, "Mommy, is what they said about you true?" Just the thought of it made her chest seize up. Taylor paced the room, furious. "These people have too much time on their hands. Give me your phone, I'm going to flame every single one of them in the plymay. Commence." Mia shook her head tiredly. "You can't fight the whole internet. If we don't fight, we die mad." Harrison stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice deadly. "I want that article taken down today. Issue a cease and desist. Archive every repost for defamation suits. Find out who funded the original blog post. I don't care what it costs." He hung up and turned to Mia. "The legal team is handling it. Stop reading." Mia gave a weak smile. "Just because I don't read it doesn't mean it's not out there." Harrison paused. She looked at him, eyes bloodshot but incredibly calm. I've stayed silent for too long. In the past, I stayed silent, and people said I cheated. Now I stay silent, and they say I used my baby to ruin a wedding. If I keep quiet, eventually someone else is going to write the story of my entire life. Taylor stopped pacing. You want to speak out? Harrison frowned. You just had surgery. You're exhausted. Let me handle this. Mia looked at him, her gaze exhausted but made of steel. You can handle the article, but you can't live my life for me, and you can't be a mother for me. That shut Harrison up. Finally, Taylor pulled up a chair, balanced her phone on a stack of books, and hit record. Go. But if you get tired, we stop. Understood? Mia sat propped up against the pillows. She wore no makeup, her hair in a messy bun, her face still pale from the C-section. But that raw vulnerability made her look devastatingly real. She looked into the lens, her lips trembling for a bow eye set, second before she took a deep breath. My name is Mia Anderson. Harrison Vance and I divorced before I knew I was pregnant. I didn't show up to ruin anyone's wedding. I didn't hide my daughter to extort money or demand a status. I hid her because I was terrified my child would be dragged into the toxic battles of adults. She paused, her eyes shining, but she didn't cry. My departure from the hospital was a legally documented transfer to a postpartum care facility. I had just undergone major abdominal surgery. I did not have the physical strength to stage the grand conspiracy people are accusing me of. Behind the phone, Taylor's eyes were red. Mia looked down at Sky. The baby shifted, her tiny mouth puckering. Mia looked back at the camera, her voice softening but every word ringing with absolute clarity. A mother might be poor, she might be weak, she might be terrified, but no one has the right to twist a bright mother's love to protect her child into a malicious scheme. The video was posted 10 minutes later. It went viral. This time the comments started to shift. People apologized for jumping to conclusions. Other mothers shared stories of going through childbirth alone. People noted that Mia didn't look like a calculating gold digger. She looked like an utterly exhausted, heartbroken mother. Taylor also posted, confirming how Mia attended appointments alone, signed her own surgical consent, and left the hospital legally. A few nurses from the hospital chimed in to back them up. The scattered fragments of the truth finally started to piece together. That afternoon, Harrison posted a public statement on his company's corporate Play channels. He stood in front of a camera, wearing a simple button-down, looking haggard but resolute. Sky is my biological daughter. The DNA results are conclusive. I canceled my wedding because I must take responsibility for my child, and because I discovered my ex-wife was framed and wrongfully accused. During our marriage, I owe Mia a public apology. The internet tide completely turned, but the real storm wasn't over. That evening, Eleanor Vance showed up at the beach house with her lead attorney. She threw a thick legal binder on the coffee table, her eyes cold and direct. Mediation is tomorrow. If you truly think you are fit to keep this child, she glared at Mia, her voice like a knife on glass. Prove it. The mediation took place on a gray Seattle morning. The clouds hung low over the gray Seattle morning skyline, making the already tense atmosphere feel suffocating. Mia sat in the back of a town car holding Sky. The baby was fast asleep, her tiny lips parted, her warm breath puffing against Mia's wrist. Seeing her daughter so peaceful made Mia's heart ache even more. A newborn should only need milk, sleep, and her mother's arms. Yet Sky was the reason adults were sitting around a mahogany table, weighing real estate, trust funds, status, and custody rights. Taylor sat next to her, handing her a thermos of hot tea. Drink. You look green. Mia shook her head. I can't swallow. Drink it anyway. You need the energy to talk. Don't let those rich snobs use your pale face to claim you're too weak to parent. Mia looked at her friend, the corner of her mouth twitching into a tiny smile. You're always so aggressive. I'm only nice to nice people. The joke coaxed a small, genuine laugh out of Mia, easing the knot in her chest for just a few seconds. When they walked into the conference room of the downtown law firm, Mia immediately spotted Eleanor. She sat at the head of the table in a dark, tailored suit, hair perfectly coiffed, her face stern and unforgiving. Next to her was her attorney, a mountain of legal briefs in front of them. Harrison was there, too, but he didn't sit next to his mother. When Mia walked in, he stood up and pulled out the chair next to him on the opposing side of the table. Eleanor's face darkened. "Harrison, sit over here." Harrison looked at his mother. "I'm fine right here." It was a short sentence, but it silenced the room. Mia sat down, holding Sky close. She didn't look at Harrison. She was afraid that if she did, a fragile hope would bloom in her chest. And right now, hope was more terrifying than disappointment. Eleanor's lawyer opened the file, his voice a droning monotone. "The Vance family possesses ample resources to guarantee the absolute best environment for Sky's development. A primary residence in Medina, professional nannies, concierge pediatric care, comprehensive health trusts, educational endowments, and guaranteed placement in elite private institutions." Every condition read aloud was perfect, logical, and utterly cold. Mia listened, feeling smaller by the second. She didn't have a mansion. She didn't have a massive trust fund. She didn't have a private doctor on retainer. She couldn't even work right now, and standing up for too long made her incision throb. Compared to the Vance empire, she was pitifully small. Eleanor looked at her, her voice not loud but suffocatingly heavy. "You love your daughter, Drumpy Bow. I know that, but love isn't enough. A child needs a future." Mia rested her hand on Sky's back, replying slowly, "I know, I don't have the things your family has." She paused, then pulled a neatly clipped stack of papers from her bag. "But I have these." Taylor helped her place them on the table. The prenatal appointment logs, the hospital bills she paid herself, the legal transfer paperwork to the postpartum center, the detailed logs of Sky's feeding, sleeping, and diaper changes. Taylor's written affidavit testifying to Mia's unwavering care despite her physical weakness. Finally, Mia placed a blue notebook on the table. Harrison froze when he recognized it. It was his notebook. The lawyer opened it. The handwriting inside wasn't polished. Some lines were clumsily crossed out. "Day 1. Cried at 1:17 a.m. Ate 2 ounces. Mia's incision hurts. Can't stand well. Day 2. Baby restless. Mia and I awake almost all night. Day 3. I put the diaper on backward. Taylor yelled at me. Mia laughed, but then winced. In pain, the room fell completely silent. That notebook didn't talk about money or status. It talked about a very raw reality. Mia had never once neglected her child. And Harrison, despite his clumsiness, was learning how to be a father alongside her, not trying to steal the baby from her. Eleanor gripped her pen tightly. She looked up at her son, her voice turning to ice. "Make your stance clear, Harrison. Do you want to bring Sky to the main estate or leave her out there with her?" She didn't wait for him to answer before issuing the ultimatum. "If you side with Mia today, I will have the board remove you from the Bainbridge Resort project. You will be suspended as CEO, and don't expect the family's PR machine to clean up your media mess." Mia looked down at Sky. She didn't dare look at Harrison. In the past, he had chosen silence, and that silence cost her their marriage, her trust, and the support she should have had during pregnancy. She didn't want to wait for his answer again. A long, agonizing pause stretched over the room. Then, the sound of a chair scraping back. Harrison stood up. His voice was deep, gravelly, but every word struck like a hammer. "My daughter needs her mother. I will not take Sky away from Mia. If the Vance family truly wants what is best for this child, the first step is respecting the woman who gave birth to her." Eleanor turned pale. "Do you realize what you are saying?" "I do." Harrison turned to look at Mia. This time she looked back. In his eyes, there was no trace of the hesitation from their past. "I stayed silent once, and I lost Mia. This time, even if I lose the project, the CEO title, or my inheritance, I will not stand on the wrong side again." Mia sat paralyzed. That sentence didn't erase the past, but it felt like a small, flickering light turning on in a pitch-black room. It was weak, but it was real. Eleanor stood up abruptly, trembling with fury. "Fine. You're so capable? Then they handle the fallout yourself." She stormed out of the mediation room, her heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. That afternoon, Harrison received the official corporate notice. He was removed from the resort project and suspended from his duties as CEO of the family firm. He read the email, then quietly placed his phone face down on the table. Mia looked at him. "Do you regret it?" Harrison offered a tired, faint smile. "I regret a lot of things in my life, but what I did today isn't one of them." That sentence left her speechless for a long time. They thought the worst of the Wenyanuk. Day was over. But that evening, baby Sky developed a fever. At first, her forehead just felt a little warm. Mia thought it was the changing Seattle weather, so she wiped her down with a lukewarm cloth and tried to feed her. But her temperature kept climbing. Sky's breathing grew wheezy, her crying weaker than usual. Panic seized Mia. Her hands and feet turned to ice. She picked up the baby and yelled for Harrison, her voice cracking. "Harrison! She's burning up! She's breathing weird!" Minutes later, Harrison's SUV tore out of the driveway, speeding through the dark, damp night. In the back seat, Mia held Sky to her chest, crying uncontrollably. She pressed her cheek to her baby's blazing forehead, her lips trembling. "Sky, look at Mommy. Please don't scare me." The SUV pulled into the emergency bay at Seattle Children's Hospital just past midnight. Mia barely remembered how she got out of the car. She only remembered clutching Sky, screaming for help until her voice gave out. Her baby was burning up, wheezing, her cries so weak that every tiny gasp felt like a hand crushing Mia's heart. "Doctor, please, her fever is too high." Harrison ran beside her. His shirt was untucked, his hair wild from the wind. He was usually a man obsessed with appearances, always composed, impeccably dressed, frustratingly calm. But right now, there wasn't a trace of the untouchable CEO. He was just a terrified father, watching his child weaken in her mother's arms. Sky was rushed into the triage ER room. The heavy doors swung shut with a soft click. Yet to Mia, it sounded like the world collapsing. She stood frozen for a few seconds before collapsing into a plastic chair in the hallway. She buried her face in her hands. The smell of bleach, the bright fluorescent lights, the frantic footsteps of nurses, it all spun around her, suffocating her. Taylor arrived breathless a few minutes later. "Mia, breathe. The doctors have... They're her. She's tiny. Fevers are scary, but they just need to monitor her. Don't assume the worst." Mia shook her head, tears leaking through her fingers. "It's my fault. It's all my fault. If I hadn't dragged her into this mess, if I had just been stronger..." "Stop saying stupid things," Taylor snapped, though her own eyes were watery. "Babies get sick. It's not your fault." But Mia couldn't hear her. Her brain was just looping the image of Sky's weak cries. The baby was only days old. Before she even got used to the sunlight, she had been dragged from a hospital to a strange house, forced to listen to adults argue about custody, money, and legacy. Harrison sat down next to her. He didn't speak immediately. He just opened the warm bottle of water he bought from a vending machine and pressed it into her hands. His own hands were freezing, but he held hers incredibly gently, as if afraid she would shatter. "Drink a little." Mia wouldn't take it. Harrison bowed his head, his voice wrecked. "It's not your fault. It's mine." She looked up, her face paper white, eyes red. He stared at the ER doors, forcing out every word. "I'm the one who let it get this far. I was a coward. I let my mother make too many decisions. I believed those damn photos instead of you. I let Chloe play me, and I actually thought I was the victim." Mia looked at him, her heart aching so much she didn't know whether to scream or cry. Harrison clasped his hands together tightly. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness right now. I know I can't make up for it. 6 months of you carrying her alone, I wasn't there. When you went into the OR, I wasn't there. When she took her first breath, I wasn't there. I know I can't turn back time." His voice choked. "I'm just asking for one thing. Let me be a father to her the right way. No lawyers, no buying you out, no letting anyone from the Vance family dictate your life ever again." Mia looked down, tears splashing onto the back of her hand. She had waited so long to hear these words. So long that, during the final days of their marriage, She used to imagine that if he just said, "I believe you," she would forgive him. For everything. But now, when the apology finally came, it didn't heal the apology finally came. Wound. It only made her realize exactly how deep the wound was. "Do you know?" she whispered. "There were nights I had horrible cramps, and I just sat on the bathroom floor, too terrified to cry out loud. I was scared if I was weak, she would feel it." Harrison closed his eyes. "I'm sorry. I hate that phrase," she let out a tearful laugh, "because it's too late." He didn't argue. The ER doors opened. A doctor stepped out, pulling down his mask. "Family 4. Sky Vance?" Both Mia and Harrison shot up. The doctor spoke calmly. "It's RSV. It caused the fever and wheezing. Thank God you brought her in when you did. The fever is coming down, but we need to keep her overnight for observation and IV fluids." Mia covered her mouth with her hands, a fresh wave of tears spilling over this. Time from pure relief. "Thank you. Thank you so much." By dawn, Sky was moved to a pediatric recovery room. She lay in the oversized crib, an IV taped to her tiny hand. Her face was still slightly flushed, but her breathing was steady. Mia sat next to the crib, refusing to take her eyes off her. Harrison stood by the railing, his hand shaking slightly. He didn't dare touch the baby, only using his pinky finger to gently stroke the edge of her blanket. "Daddy's here," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Daddy's here." When the sun fully rose, Eleanor Vance arrived at the hospital. She walked, faster than usual, her coat partially unbuttoned. She had likely prepared a speech blaming them on the drive over. But when she reached the door, she stopped dead in her tracks. Harrison was sitting on the floor, his back against the wall. His shirt was a wrinkled mess, his eyes red from staying up all night. In one hand, he held a bottle of formula. In the other, the blue notebook, carefully logging the times. Sky took her medication, and when her fever broke, he didn't look like the flawless, brilliant son she was so proud of. He looked like a terrified father. Eleanor stood frozen in the doorway. Mia looked up and spoke to her, exhausted, but clear. "I don't need him to defeat you. I just need my daughter to grow up, without being a pawn in anyone's game." Eleanor lowered her eyes. A long time passed before she quietly reached into her designer bag, pulled out the massive custody lawsuit binder, and without a word, without making a scene, walked over to the hospital trash can and dropped it in. Harrison saw her. She turned to him, her voice softer and hoarser than he had ever heard it. "Tell Mia I'll stop by tomorrow. There's something I need to give her." The next morning, when Mia woke up in the hospital chair, she saw Eleanor, sitting quietly in the corner of the room. In her hands was Mia's old pregnancy journal, the one filled with blank spaces under accompanying partner. 1 year later, the beach house on Bainbridge Island was bathed in the late afternoon sun. It wasn't blinding, just a soft, golden honey glow spilling over the wisteria vines. On the porch, the light caught the pink and white balloons tied lopsidedly to the railing and illuminated the incredibly sad-looking cake sitting on the wooden patio table. The words, "Happy First Birthday Sky," were written in strawberry frosting, but the letters were so wild, a toddler's finger painting. Taylor stared at the cake, her arms crossed, biting her lip to keep from dying of laughter. "Harrison, I'm gonna be honest. If you tried to sell this, your bakery would get shut down by the health department." Harrison, who was holding Sky, cleared his throat awkwardly, "Making it myself is the thought that counts." Yeah, if the thought was, "Is this a cake or a collapsed construction site?" Mia stood by the table, unable to stop the corners of her mouth from curving up. Sky didn't care if the cake was pretty or ugly. The 1-year-old had a tiny sprout of hair tied in a mini ponytail on her head. Wearing a soft white dress, she kept grabbing onto Mia's skirt, taking wobbly, uncoordinated steps. Every time she almost face-planted, Harrison would panic and catch her, while Sky just giggled hysterically, as if giving adults heart attacks was the most fun game in the world. There were no glamorous guests, no PR photographers, no massive floral arches. Just a few close friends, Taylor, the doula who had helped Mia in the early days, a house full of laughter, and Eleanor, who had arrived late with a small box in her hands. Over the past year, things had changed slowly. After that night in the hospital, Eleanor formally dropped all custody threats. She didn't apologize immediately. A woman who spent her whole life barking orders and watching people bow didn't learn how to soften overnight. But she started calling before visiting. Whenever she sent things, formula, toys, booking a specialist, she would ask Mia, "Does this work for you?" The first time Mia heard it, she thought she was hallucinating. As for Chloe, she vanished from their lives as quietly as she had invaded them. The audio recording, the digital footprint of the blog payments, and the subtle threats were all handed to Harrison's lawyers. Chloe's family quietly pulled out of the resort merger to avoid a catastrophic scandal. There was no dramatic, movie-style revenge scene, just a silent collapse that proved one thing: empires, built on lies, eventually crush the people who build them. Harrison lost his spot at the family corporation. For the past year, he opened a boutique real estate development firm in Seattle, taking on smaller, manageable projects. Every day after work, he drove straight to the ferry to Bainbridge. Even when he was delayed by traffic, he would still come home, sterilize the bottles, change diapers, and rock Sky to sleep. But the hardest thing he had to learn wasn't how to hold a baby. It was learning to ask Mia before making a decision. "Are you okay with this?" It was a simple question, but to Mia, it was worth more than 1,000 promises. She didn't get back together with him right away. She didn't forgive him easily. There were still nights when old trauma resurfaced, where she'd dream of standing in the rain, pregnant, calling a phone that just kept ringing. But when she woke up in a cold sweat, the living room light would be on. Harrison would be sitting there quietly updating Sky's logbook, with a hot heating pad and a cup of ginger tea waiting for her. That afternoon, Eleanor placed the small box in front of Mia. "I kept this from that day in the hospital." Mia opened it. Inside wasn't a diamond necklace or a trust fund deed. It was her old maternity journal, carefully rebound in leather. The pages were a little curled at the edges, still showing all the blank spaces where Harrison was supposed to be. Eleanor looked at the book, her voice rough. "In the past, I only looked at your background. I never saw what you were actually enduring. Thank you for raising Sky to be so healthy." Mia stayed quiet for a long time. She didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't okay. It was far from okay. But eventually, she accepted the book. "I'll take this. As for the past, let's just take it one day at a time, Eleanor." Eleanor nodded. Her eyes were slightly red, but she turned away quickly. Just then, Harrison brought the cake over. Sky instantly reached out and smeared a plangent, massive glob of pink frosting right onto his shirt. Taylor burst out laughing. "There it is. The cake getting revenge on the baker." Harrison leaned down and kissed the top of Sky's head. "You little menace." After the party, while everyone was enjoying the ocean breeze on the deck, Harrison handed Mia a thick, leather-bound notebook. Inside was a record of every day of Sky's life. Today she rolled over. Today she got her first tooth. Today, Mia smiled a little longer than yesterday. On the very last page, he wrote, "I'm not asking you to forget the past. I'm just asking to help you write the new days, as slow as you need, as long as this time I never let go." Mia read it, her eyes stinging. She looked at him. The man standing in front of her was still Harrison Vance, but he was no longer the Harrison who coldly signed divorce papers. She didn't say she forgave him. She didn't promise to start over. She just took a napkin, wiped a smudge of frosting off the corner of his mouth, and said softly, "Next time you bake, use less sugar. It's bad for her teeth." Harrison froze, and then he smiled, a light, genuine smile that was as bright as the setting sun. Out on the deck, Sky was taking wobbly steps between them. On one side was her mother's hand, the hand that had carried her through the darkest, most terrifying days. On the other side was her father's hand, the hand that was finally learning how to hold a family together with gentleness. Mia looked at her daughter and let out a soft breath. Some wounds never truly disappear. But if someone is genuine enough, patient enough, and brave enough to fix their mistakes, then right out of those cracks, something green and beautiful can still grow. Before we close today's story, perhaps what lingers the most isn't just how much Mia suffered, or how late Harrison realized his mistakes. It's a very real, everyday question. In our closest relationships, have we ever hurt someone because we believed what we saw, while forgetting to listen to what their heart was desperately trying to explain. Some misunderstandings can be solved with just one caring question. Some breakups could be avoided if we just chose to trust, rather than leaving scars that last a lifetime. And a mother, no matter how weak she may seem, will become stronger than anyone else when standing in front of her child. Mia's story reminds us that love isn't just about beautiful promises. When the skies are clear, true love is found when the hurricane hits. Do we have the courage to stand by each other, to admit when we're wrong, to fix our mistakes, and to patiently heal the things we once broke? A home doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be a place where no one is left alone when it hurts the most. If this story gave you something to think about, leave a comment below. Do you think Mia should open her heart to Harrison one more time? Thank you for listening to the end of our story. If you love tales about love, marriage, and the raw, real-life lessons learned after everything falls apart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can meet again in our next story.